We're back. We are back. This is not a drill. Honkai Star Rail is actually back. After what feels like the longest drought in HSR history, we are finally back with one of, if not the biggest updates ever. Hey guys, MrPokke here, and to usher in the new version update along with its absolutely insane amount of content, my editor team as well as myself have undertaken the impossible. More than 10 different dedicated early access videos to get you guys prepared for what is to come in version 4, this being the first of its series. After multiple sleepless nights, even as of this time recording, I don't think I've slept for like... It is what it is. And today we're going to be jumping straight into Yao Guang's early access review, being our first ever 4.0 unit. Photo very soon with Sparxie, as well as a separate video for the guide to Elation itself. So we'll be talking about her team comms, light comms, Eidolons, etc, etc. So without further ado, let's get into today's content. And if you found this content useful, smash that like and subscribe button. So in summary, Yao Guang is essentially the Kafka of Elation archetype with her ties to the brand new Elation mechanic, namely Aha, as well as the Elation skills, while also providing pretty universal buffs such as Res Pen as well as vulnerability. You can check out this dedicated video over here, which should be coming out very soon, on how Elation works, because it will essentially be the core mechanic of version 4. But you can kind of just think of Elation as your very own Lightning Lord, which is going to be Aha. Now this Aha will proc Elation skills every time it acts. So the more Elation units with Elation skills, the more damage it will deal every single turn. And yes, Yao Guang can proc Aha on her own ultimate, just like how Kafka can proc DOT with her kit. So these are the following buffs that she's going to provide to her entire team. 20% elation based on Yao Guang's own elation. Full skill point positivity because her base is going to be 30 energy. Team-wide ultimate res pen 20% for 3 turns. Elation skill with the 16% vulnerability and +1 skill point. 3 punch lines on your basic or skill as well as 5 on the ultimate. And lastly, your certified banger talent, which is when any ally attacks, you'll have an additional instance of elation damage at 20%. Very similar to Robin's physical damage. So Yao Guang's gimmick outside of the damage amplification from Res Pen and vulnerability is mainly the ability to trigger your Aha instances via her ultimate, which will generate more certified bangers and proc more elation skills for your entire team. So in the future, as your elation flagship becomes full circle on a team of 4, you will see how important Yao Guang's ultimate is going to be, because Aha instances will directly increase your entire team's damage output. Now jumping into the character kit, in casual terms, maintain 100% uptime on your skill, basic until you get your ultimate, and use your ultimate, you rinse and repeat. That is pretty much it. As a matter of fact, for most Elation units, especially for Yao Guang as well as Sparxie right now, their kits are relatively straightforward. It's just that the mechanic for Elation may feel very new for the new players. So for a basic attack, you don't really have too much to say. 3 target like destruction. You only cast your basic once your skill is going to be out of the field. Same energy regeneration as your skill, just like Spargo. So a very skill point positive unit. And in regards to her skill, it's also very straightforward, similar to Runmei, Trippy as well as Bubbin, where she'll deploy this zone that increase all allies' elation by 20% of Yao Guang's elation. And on top of that, once you use your basic or skill, you'll gain 3 punchline. So generally speaking, just make sure this skill is always going to be up at 100% uptime so that you can get all of the effects. Now, one thing to note is that this thing over here, gaining your allies' elation, right? This elation mechanic, so any buffs that gives you more elation, they are all considered very valuable stats buffs because we don't have access to a lot of elation buffs. Similar to how back in those days, weakness break efficiency is extremely rare for any super break team comps, until eventually we have even more weakness break unit, such as for example Dahlia as well as E1 Fuke. Now move on to her ultimate. She'll give you 5 punch lines, team-wide 20% res pen, as well as the bread and butter for the 20 fixed punch line for the additional Aha instance. So this is essentially Yao Guang's core mechanic, just like how Kafka will proc DOT, with Yao Guang proccing more Aha instances, which can trigger more elation skills. So for the 20 certified bangers, which are converted from the 20 punch lines, it will be calculated independently for each of those stacks, as you can see from this little table over here, going away after 3 turns because of Yao Guang's passive. For other units, it's going to be 2 turns. By now, you would have noticed a 180 energy cost is honestly very, very expensive, and all of her buffs are tied to a 3-turn duration for the certified bangers, for res pen, for everything, right? So, can you maintain a 100% ultimate uptime? And unfortunately, unless we have some additional mechanics like Ligers, sadly, not really. The energy rotation will be depending if you're going to be running with or without her signature light cone. Ultimately, it will be tying down to a 4-turn ultimate. Assuming you're going to be running energy regeneration rope with Vonwek or Lushaga, this is going to be the table right now as you can see over here. So the key for running your S1 is going to be giving your 4-turn ultimate is that you only need to get hit 1 more time instead of getting hit 3 more times at 10 energy. But also, depending on the hits they are receiving, it will vary between 5, 10, and 15 energy respectively. But that being said, this formula actually does not consider one thing, which is AHA itself. Because as you know by now, AHA instances can proc Elation skills, which also generates 5 energy per proc, as well as dealing toughness bar damage. So assuming that you can trigger 2 AHA instants every 4 turns, the graph will look something like this instead. Your first ultimate will always grant that first AHA instance for free because that's going to be Yao Guang's kit. So this means that with your S1, you will guarantee a 4-turn ultimate since AHA will definitely act at least once by itself before the end of 4 turns. Now, one important tip to note over here is it is not possible to turn one out with Yao Guang without the S1 unless you get hit. But even if you can immediately cast Yao Guang's ultimate, it is really good if you can ideally hold on this ultimate until you get Sparkle's ultimate buff, which will substantially increase your overall damage. Because Elation damage, while it doesn't scale with elemental percentage, it will still scale with multipliers such as crit damage, all sorts of defense, right? So generally speaking, treat this as you would for any DPS. You want to first apply your other buffs and debuffs, then activate your ultimate. So you can see the damage differential over here is going to be very big, from 550,000 to 1.2 million, simply because we waited for Sparkle's ultimate. As of right now, like I mentioned, it is not really possible to hit a 3-turn ultimate, which would mean 100% uptime, but this may change if AHA's speed can ramp up with more Elation units or other energy regeneration sources, such as, for example, running Huo. We'll be talking more about Elation skill of the talent. Speaking about the talent, that is going to be when Yao Guang holds certified banger and all that kind of stuff, right? So just for your Elation units, their talents are only triggered if you have certified banger. So it appears that for both Yao Guang as well as Sparxie, this will be the case, meaning that without your AHA instance converting your punchlines into certified bangers, this will not have any effect. As of right now, it's not that big of a deal because you always end up battle into this certified bangers, but for talent itself, it is gonna be a relatively minor damage increase with Great Boot, which is an additional 20% Elation damage instance, very similar to Robin's physical damage instance or Triby's additional quantum damage instance. Now, if the attack consumes skill points, such as for example Archer, there will be 2 instances instead, so any skill point DPS will get 1 additional proc. Now, one thing to note is that if the unit getting this buff has a lower Elation, which will be the case for non-Elation DPS, it will just base Elation from Yao Guang instead, so there is a higher damage floor even for those non-Elation targets, such as for example if your supports or sustains or even your non-Elation DPS wants to do an attack. Now, for the second last thing is going to be her Elation skill. Also going to be an Elation exclusive, similar to how Remembrance has the exclusive Mimo Sprites, but this one is going to be for Elation instead. So for Yao Guang, this will always proc first because of her lower ID compared to Sparkle, dealing 16% vulnerability for 3 turns to all targets, with a 100% multiplier as well as 20% times 5 bounce, so 200% for a single target. Generally, you don't really have an issue having 100% uptime because your AHA will definitely move by itself, so as long as you move your AHA once every 3 turns, you'll always get this 60% vulnerability. Though with this trait, she'll also recover 1 skill point every single time, which will improve your skill point economy on top of her already being skill point positive. Then lastly, for a technique, it is gonna be a zone support class. You guys cast your skill for free with the energy, so you can aim for a turn 1 ultimate with your S1. Like I mentioned, this is only with S1. If you do not have S1, you need to get hit. Now, the other thing, which is gonna be the Fortune Pouch, it is basically like a overworld, literally like an angbao, 8 times every week for a little bit more resources if you're gonna be a new player playing this game, right? So far I got in the credits, I'm not sure what other resources can you get from this angbao. Now, jumping into the major traces, for the first one, for Amazing Grace, at 120 to 200 speed, it will give you additional Elation anywhere between 30% to 110% at 200 speed. So for consideration, this 200 speed is not achievable as of right now, as you will need more than 25 speed substats with speed boots and the new 4P speed. So this is likely designed with future speed buffers in mind, or it is just not meant to hit the absolute ceiling for players. For now, aim as high of a speed as possible to get the elation percentage conversion for Yao Guang. Then for the second trait, it will be a 60% crit damage increase, allowing for it to act as a sub DPS, as well as focusing on speed as well as crit rate for the build, with your elation skill improving your skill point economy. Now, one need to note that for this skill point recovery, there is no cooldown, meaning that if you can cast your elation skill multiple times, you can actually get a lot of skill points from Yao Guang himself. And then lastly, Felicity Ensemble, all bangers the last one more turn on Yao Guang, which is a very decent quality of life, though her elation skill doesn't really deal too much damage at only 200% multiplier, so it is not super important. On the other hand, if you want to compare to Sparxie, this will be actually massive because Sparxie is almost more than 500% multiplier instead of Yao Guang. And then for the minor traits, that's crit rate, speed, as well as elation. Very good, especially because it's 18.7% crit with 9 speed, so absolutely insane. And like I mentioned, elation is just a very rare field for any elation DPS. And then for skill leveling, priority is going to be ultimate and skill, followed by your talent and elation skill, followed by your basic. Now moving on to the signature Lightcoins and Lightcoin portion, this effect looks a lot. You have 18% speed, 10% crit rate, 30% crit damage, and 12% energy regeneration. And on top of that, at every single wave, the wearer will gain a fixed 15 energy. Now, as you guys can see from the description, there actually isn't an effect that says not stackable, or this thing only triggers once. So if we have more elation supports in the future, probably not going to be the same situation as Topaz S1, but you can theoretically stack on this signature Lightcoins effect. It is just that we don't really have anyone else that can use this because Sparxie's ultimate is not going to be a target for your allies, right? So if we have more elation supports, they could potentially consider running this because you're basically at double the crit rate, crit damage, as well as your wearer's energy regeneration. On top of that, getting the 15 fixed energy. With that established, this is an extremely comfortable Lightcoin comparable to S1 Runmei with a massive speed buff, crit value, energy regeneration, and so forth. Now, the most important thing to note is that for our elation path, this is a brand new path. So we literally have no other substitutes except for gacha Lightcoins until Herda Store produces a similar replacement in the future. Now, the good thing is that your elation 4 stars are actually really good. Specifically, Mushroom Adventure for 20% elation buff as well as 10% elation damage taken at S5. Now, since most players will probably not have this S5, I just took a S1 to S1 comparison just for the damage you can see over here. So as you can see, the signature Lightcoin is roughly a 23% damage increase between the S1 to a S1 Mushroom. Though if the Mushroom is going to be an S5, this gap will be closer to 15% or less, making the damage increase not as impactful compared to, for example, a DPS S1 and its alternative. Now, that being said, this damage will scale up with more elation skills added, so eventually when the elation flagship is fully formed, expect the damage gap to become even wider with this Yao Guang S1. But not talking about the damage, the energy regeneration and the crit value and the speed cannot really be measured normally, but they are all excellent stats to make your team's build easier, especially on the crit rate. And Yao Guang having more ultimate uptime, especially once again with more elation units, will make this entire Lightcoin have a lot of value. So overall, a very strong S1 as of this current moment. Maybe Herda Store produces a better one, who knows, but as of right now, this is really good. Now, moving on to the Relics, Yao Guang's build is actually really simple. You will basically run the brand new 4-piece Diviner with either Von Weg or Luxaka 2-piece. If needed, you can consider running 2+2 speed for more elation percentage conversion, but the new set is extremely strong because it already gives you a free 10% elation on top of crit value. So your Diviner you can see over here is a definitive best slot with 6% speed, 18% crit rate, which is easily achievable by 160 speed, as well as 10% elation buff. Now, like I mentioned, elation buff are very rare because we don't have many sources of elation buffs as of right now. So a unit that can make use of this will definitely improve your entire team's elation damage for AHA as well. If you don't want to run this, 4-piece Hackerspace or 2+2 speed can be considered, but it is a very big downgrade because you lose so much crit rate as well as the rare elation percent. Although, if you want to run Yao Guang outside of a elation DPS, then it is less impactful, but I would not recommend it. And then for the 2-piece, you can either go for Luxaka or the Von Weg. They are both pretty good as long as you get the 5% energy regeneration, which is very helpful for your 4-turn ultimates. Now, depending on the situation, you will see if you prefer the 40% action value advance, which will guarantee a 200 speed wave 1 as well as faster ultimates, or the 12% attack buff, which can also be converted to, for example, elation percentage for Sparxie, or just a straight up damage increase for any attack scaling DPS. And then for your main and subsets, you're going to be aiming for crit damage or crit rate body, speed boots, HP or defense sphere, as well as energy regeneration rope, with the subsets focusing on speed as well as crit rate. So one thing to note, if you're going to be running crit damage or crit rate, it depends if you got yourself the signature Lycon, which will then give you a free 10% crit rate. So S1 plus the Diviner set will actually give Yao Guang 28% combat crit rate. So incoming, you see over here, my gear is going to be 178 speed with 56.4 crit rate, but we actually closer to 84.4% in combat, making this a really good choice for crit damage chest. Though if you do not have the S1, then going for the crit rate chest is going to be much more ideal. Everything else is pretty straightforward. For the speed boots, energy regeneration rope, as well as the defensive sphere, you don't really want attack or elemental percentage because Elation does not scale off of those, right? And unlike Sparxie, which has the attack conversion buff, Yao Guang does not have this. So just go for a defensive sphere for a little bit more comfort. Now, with that, we've come to the end of basically her builds. We're now going to jump into the Eidolons segment, starting off with the E1. So this is going to be a very strong E1 because you do get double the punch lines from 20 to 40, which also means you are going to be getting double the certified bangers for your entire Elation team, improving their talent's damage. On top of that, 20% defense ignore will scale very nicely with Elation DPS because it appears that Elation wants to dive into your defense ignore portion, especially if you can see from the magical growth set for Sparxie as well as Sparxie's kit itself. So generally speaking, I wouldn't be too surprised if future Elation DPS will also want to focus on stacking defense ignore or defense down. So you can kind of compare this as a E1 run Mei with a team-wide 20% defense down buff, but with a stronger multiplier because of the 40 punch lines. And for players who are determined to go for the Elation flagship, then this effect is going to be scaling up even higher. So for any vertical cost investments, E1 is also a really strong damage increase. Now, jumping into the E2, although it looks very straightforward, the numbers and the values itself are very strong. It is a raw 16% elation increase as well as a 12% speed increase. Now, considering how AHA itself, the entire instance, it will scale off your team speed. Once again, check out our elation guide in the future. The team-wide speed buff is directly tied to your AHA speed buff, especially if you have 4 elation units in the future. On top of that, we have the very rare 16% elation multiplier. Now, I would say if this was gonna be an E1, it will be considered a game-changing Eidolon comparable to E1 tribute. But unfortunately, because this is E2, it is going to be a little bit expensive for players who want to go for the vertical investment. Then jumping to the E4, this is actually one of the strongest E4s I've ever seen in the entire life because it is a 50% multiplier damage increase, which is absolutely crazy because it is damage dealt by all allies' elation skill. So if you have an entire team of elation units and their elation skills are going to be where their core damage is coming from, this is straight up a 50% raw damage multiplier increase, which is comparable to, for example, your Akron's trace back when she was running with 1 or 2 utility units. Unfortunately, this is only triggered by Yao Guang's ultimate and not AHA's natural turns. So you can only get this once every 4 turns, which is why I guess they made this into E4, because if this was for every single AHA instance, then it would be absolutely broken. Then lastly, for the E6, merrymaking. Merrymaking is pretty much the only source in this entire game from Yao Guang's E6. So we're going to be explaining this in the Elation guide again, but this is basically a separate multiplier only for the Elation damage formula. And because as of right now, merrymaking's only source is Yao Guang's E6, you can even compare this to true damage because it is a completely independent multiplier. Aside from that, a 100% multiplier increase on the skill is basically doubling her damage on AHA, which is a classic DPS support E6 Eidolon. So at this point, E1 or S1. At a baseline, E0S0 Yao Guang's kit is fine, but both her E1 and S1 provides a substantial amount of comfort as well as damage amplification boost. In terms of cost, S1 is going to be cheaper and provides you with more quality of life, especially for energy regeneration, but in terms of raw damage, E1, especially when you scale this up with multiple Elation DPS, is going to go up a lot higher. For me personally, strictly just for the cost, I will go for the S1, but if you want more damage, I will then go for the E1. Now moving into the team comp portion, all tests over here was done using the upcoming MOC12 new boss, the Sparxie Con official, which I'm again going to be providing a guide in the future. I mainly just wanted to see how Yao Guang is going to be faring with and without Sparxie, which will be outside of Elation teams. So I ran with a E1 Archer as well as a E0 and Nexa for comparison. Spargo was E0S0, all DPS and DHPD has their signature weapon, so you can see the results over here. So for our very first DPS, and that is going to be Sparxie, definitely the best team as of version 4 for Elation. So right now, we'll discuss this more with Sparxie's early access guide, which will be coming in probably on the same day, assuming that I can actually get it out. Generally speaking, the team is very, very simple to play. AI on full auto doesn't have too much of a difference between your manual gameplay. You stack buffs with Yao Guang as well as Sparxie. Sparxie spams skill points for the punchlines, and then your AHA deals big damage. Now, there is a certain element of RNG because Sparxie's skills sometimes have this +2 skill point and +2 punchline effect, so you kind of have to gamble with her damage ceiling just like QQ. The exact probability between straight fire, which is a 2 skill point and 2 punchline, as well as the Unreal Banger, which is just a 1 punchline, is going to be unknown. So just hope that you get a good turn and AHA, lets you deal more damage. I would say that this team is unironically performing very, very well, even without DHPD, because you can run this unit called Huo, since everyone in this team actually wants energy regeneration, which could also potentially create a 3-turn ultimate on Yao Guang, whether or not EMC or another Elation slot is going to come into place for Spargo. Now, there is one problem, which is Huo as of right now, her sustain as well as skill point economy is very, very bad, so DHPD is still a much more comfortable pick. But if you can actually deal with the lack of sustain and just go for all-in damage, sacrificing a little bit more skill points, you could consider running Huo for this specific setup. Now next, this is gonna be with our E1 Archer, the free unit, right? This is actually extremely strong, not really because of Yao Guang, but also because of Spargo's buff in place as well. So for E0 Archer, you can expect a 1 or 2 cycle difference, while Yao Guang is not gonna be that good as a non-Elation support. Res Pen and Vulnerability are still gonna be very useful in this case for our E1 Archer. Now for Archer himself, he was able to instantly clear the subfield domain in a single turn with his ultimate, allowing for the entire fight to be over very quickly because we do apply the Tilda debuff for Sparxie Con. Now overall, the next best DPS aside from Sparxie is pretty much going to be your E1 Archer, but not really because of Yao Guang, but more so for Spargo synergy as well as the MOC buff favoring Elation as a whole. Then lastly, I also tried this out with a Nexa, which we still cleared, but it is gonna be at a much slower 5 cycle. A Nexa actually suffers a lot of Sparxie Con when he brings him to the subfield, heavily reducing the team-wide damage as a Nexa cannot break free fast enough, especially if it doesn't have the ultimate ready to spam his double skill on command. You could expect way better performance if you would run Sunday a Nexa instead of Spargo a Nexa, but I just want to keep Spargo for the consistency, so I'm so sorry Sunday mates. You definitely cannot use Yao Guang to replace the OG and Nexa comp, which is going to be done with Cyrene, aligning with our value placement that she's mainly going to be an Elation support, which will definitely suffer when forcing her with non-Elation and well-established teams like your Enforced DPS with Cyrene. Now lastly, we're just going to talk about our endgame performance. I will only showcase this portion for Yao Guang as well as E1 Archer, as Sparxie will hold her own results in the Sparxie guide. So for that one, check it out in the future, right? So this entire thing was done with E0S1 Yao Guang, E1S1 Archer, E0S0 Spargo, as well as the E0S1 DHPD, and the results are shown right here. So for Mermaid of Chaos, I already said the same things for Sparxie Con, so I'm not going to talk about it that much over here. Basically, he deals a lot of damage and you can just straight away skip the entire phase by a single turn if you have enough skill points and your ultimate. Now for the Lygas portion, Archer actually just brute forced and ignored all the mobs. And like I mentioned, this is done in completely full auto on AI. So because of the fact that we ignore all the mobs, we only rely on Yao Guang's Elation skill, DHP's AoE damage, as well as the MOC buff to slowly clear out the mobs, which eventually doesn't really matter because Lygas only transformed a single time and Archer just killed him in like 2 cycles. So yep, really strong damage. Now, the more impressive, or like rather the surprising result I expected is actually going to be Pure Fiction, because I think we all know that Archer, especially E1 Archer, his performance in Memory of Chaos has been absolutely insane for a very long time now. But in Pure Fiction, we always expected Archer to suffer, except that this time, we actually got a full auto 40k clear on both halves of Pure Fiction, inclusive of off-element examples. Actually unreal, and I couldn't even believe that AI was able to do this. So the main thing is because the AHA buff from a Resurging Tide really helped a lot of the AoE due to the free AHA instance. While Yao Guang as well as DHPD helped a little bit to clear the mobs in, for example, Wave 1, Wave 2, and Wave 3, Archer's single skill can easily kill one mob in a single hit. And because we have so many skill points with Spargo, there wasn't a big difference between the AoE damage as well as Archer's raw single target damage. He kind of just cleared Wave 1 extremely quickly just by himself. This got even better for the Elite as well as bosses in Wave 2 and 3, with Yao Guang supplementing our support damage with DHPD. Essentially, we do it 40k on the very last AHA action in Bronya, completely off element, and then while True Stain was going to be a little bit faster, almost a 1 cycle remaining timer because we have the on element advantage as well as the vulnerability from the bugs. Then lastly, for MrPokke Shadows, there are almost no differences on top of having a very good performance, which is also pretty surprising, especially for Facial. Now for Nigador, this was really good for Archer because of the War Armor mechanic, and the AoE hits from Yao Guang as well as DHPD dealt with the spears, while still having a comfortable shield from DHPD to sustain. Archer himself just has extremely strong damage and toughness bar damage, so we hit a 1826 phase 1 break, which could have been even faster if we had a faster Sparkle on this early access server. As such, we basically almost just never run out of skill points and just spam all of our skills non-stop. For Facial, it was a little bit slower, but the Wolf transformation mechanic on DHPD allowed for really good toughness bar damage, which still resulted in a 1875 phase 1 break. Now on the second portion, Archer could also break the other parts, but AI just went to brute force Facial directly, which I don't really understand why, because we could have dealt quantum damage to like some of the parts, but it is what it is. Generally speaking, I would say for both MrPokke Shadows, E1 Archer should have no issues whatsoever if you're gonna be clearing with this setup. So my final thoughts for this entire unit for Yao Guang, her value with Elation units at this point is just going to be Sparxie, is going to be extremely high, core for pretty much all of the Elation teams. Very prospective future similar to casters with Tribi right before Hyacinth, except that we haven't even gotten our EMC yet. So when EMC actually comes out, you could see a future with Yao Guang, EMC, the Elation DPS, and then you have one last star in the middle, either that being a main DPS or a sustain, depending if EMC is going to be a sustain or a support. So that's going to be up for the future. But if you're going to be using Yao Guang in all of Elation teams, at best, she's going to be a side-grade replacement, such as, for example, your Runmei and Robin. At worst, she's pretty much going to be a downgrade from your dedicated supports, such as Servitra for Phynon and Cyrene for units like Anexa. So with that, we've come to the end of Yao Guang's early access review. This has been a super overworking. I'm not going to sleep tonight. I'm just going to work super hard on Sparxie's guy so that we can get to you guys out in the same day. Let me know what you guys think in the thoughts and comments down below. We have a lot of videos cooked up for this version 4. All the best for gacha pools. Word of the day is going to be white. Join Discord, join Twitter. Use code POKE for 10% off gamer subs. All the best for gacha pools. See you guys next time. Bye.